The cruiser Reish glided through the silent stretch of space, its hull glowing faintly under the light of distant stars. Inside the biodeck, the healing chamber held its most precious cargo, Princess Inara of Xyloria. Blue fluid swirled around her still form, and monitors ticked off her weakening signs. Every pulse sounded like a final farewell. Scientists and nobles crowded the glass wall, their faces etched with fear. Inara, daughter of the galaxy's oldest royal line, lay trapped between life and death, stricken by a virus that no Xylorian cure could touch. Captain Joran Vale stood apart from the huddle, arms folded over his broad chest. He was a human warrior, hired as ceremonial guard for the princess's voyage. He had seen battles among desert tribes and fought bandits on 3 worlds, yet he now faced a different enemy: helplessness. The Xylorian virus had spread too fast, its tendrils slipping past every defense. He remembered Inara's warm smile when he first bowed before her, could not bear to lose her, not when hope still flickered in the edges of his heart. Every hour, the council chemist offered a new serum, each more radical than the last. Noble lords whispered of political disaster if the princess died. The Araish would limp back to Xyloria in shame, and the fragile alliance between worlds would shatter. Joran had overheard their whispers of blame, but he refused to stand by. He moved closer to the chamber, placing a steady hand on the cool glass. He felt the faint tremor of the princess's breath. His chest tightened. She was not a prize or a pageant queen. She was a living soul, and he owed her every ounce of his strength. In the corridor beyond the biodeck, Dr. Alyssa Marin pulled Joran aside. Her eyes were bright with both strain and determination. "Your blood differs," she said softly. "Earth's diversity holds genetic keys we lack." Joran shook his head. "Mixing human DNA with royal Xylorian blood. The council will never allow it." She studied him for a moment. "They will. If you persuade them, you have their respect, Captain. Use it." Joran looked back at the chamber, where Inara lay so still. Hope blossomed in him, but fear knotted in his belly. What price would he pay to save her life? As the Aresh drifted ever closer to the dying sun that lay ahead, its heat creeping through layers of shielding, the situation grew desperate. The ship's chief engineer warned that the fusion core could overload if repairs were delayed. Disaster on 2 fronts pressed in on everyone. The High Council chamber, voices rose in heated debate. Some argued for an open alliance with humans, others snarled at the very idea. Joran could hear his own name mentioned, sometimes in praise, sometimes in scorn. He felt the weight of his duty as a warrior, and as a man who cared too deeply late in the night cycle. Joran returned alone to the biodeck. The corridor lights were dimmed, but he remembered every tile. He stood before the healing chamber once more. He spoke to the princess, as if she could hear. "Inara, you are stronger than any blade I have wielded. Fight this darkness in you." For a moment, nothing stirred. Then a single, faint spark of color warmed her cheeks. The monitors blinked flatline, reforming into a slow, steady beat. Joran pressed his hand against the glass, feeling a tremor of life beneath. He allowed himself a small, hopeful breath. In that quiet moment, he made a silent vow. He would plead with the council, challenge tradition, and face disgrace if needed. Would unlock the power of human healing for her sake. No virus, no barrier. Of bloodlines, no law would stop him. Princess Inara would live. The galaxy would see that compassion and courage could outshine any fear. And in that promise, Joran Vale found the spark that would guide him through the trials ahead. Joran stood before the tall holoscreen in the ship's bioarchive, its light flickering across his determined face. He scanned lines of ancient human research, each entry a lifeline for a lost explorer or a crew struck by plague. His broad fingers traced the record of Earth's famous Genoel cure, a treatment that used human stem cells to heal incurable diseases. The more he read, the more he felt the stirrings of hope. If human DNA could save his own people, perhaps it could save Inara. He bookmarked every reference, resolved to bring this miracle to light. He hurried down the corridor to Dr. Alyssa Marin's makeshift lab. Sighed, the air smelled of antiseptic. and charged particles. Beakers of glowing fluid lined the shelves, and wires snaked around every surface. Elisa looked up from her console, worry shadowing her bright eyes. "What did you find?" she asked quietly. Shiren tapped the screen. "Human stem cell therapy. It cured plagues on half a dozen worlds. We may be able to adapt it for Xylorian." Physiology. Hope and fear clashed in Elisa's expression, but then her lips curved into a determined smile. "Then let us begin." Over the next hours, Joran and Elisa worked side by side. She instructed him on the delicate process, isolating pluripotent cells, synthesizing growth factors, and preparing cross-species inoculations. Joran's large hands moved with surprising care as he handled micropipettes and test tubes. For every success, a new challenge emerged. The Xylorian cellular structure reacted unpredictably with human proteins. Late into the night cycle, they watched sample after sample fail. Yet each setback only steeled Joran's resolve. He remembered Inara's pale, silent form in the healing chamber, and knew he could not abandon her. Before dawn, the pair achieved a breakthrough. A tiny Xylorian cell, infused with human stem cells, began to regenerate under the microscope. Split and grew, displaying signs of vitality neither species showed alone. Elisa's voice trembled as she whispered, "It works." Joran felt a warm wave of triumph, shut down the console, and gently closed the lab door behind him. Soft hum of the ship felt different now, charged with possibility. He carried that promise in his heart as he headed to the High Council's chamber. The council hall was vast and circular, lined with carved pillars that told the history of Xyloria. Dozens of nobles sat in resplendent robes, their faces a mix of curiosity and contempt as Joran entered. He held his chin high, though his heart pounded. At the center, Elder Valmer spoke first. "Human guardian, you seek to alter royal blood. Why should we trust your people's medicine?" Warren cleared his throat and stepped forward. "Because my people's diversity is our strength. This cure has saved millions on Earth and other colonies. I believe it can save Princess Inara." Murmurs rippled across the hall. Some nobles' brows furrowed in disgust at the thought of human cells mingling with royal Xylorian veins. Others leaned forward, their eyes bright with curiosity. Joran laid out the evidence, test results, growth charts, microscopic images. He described the hope he felt when the first cell showed life. With each word, he could sense the tide shifting. Yet, as he spoke his last plea, Elder Valmer raised a gloved hand. "Your passion is noted, but our traditions forbid such mixing of bloodlines. We refuse your request." A hush fell, as though the air itself mourned Inara's fate. Felt his hope falter, but he squared his shoulders. "If you turn me down," he said softly, "then I will do it myself." The chamber erupted in outrage. Guards stood, their weapons drawn not to kill, but to remove him by force. Joran held up his hands in peace. "I ask only to save her life." His voice cracked with emotion. For a moment, no one moved. Then the doors slammed open, and he was escorted out, his plea echoing in the silent hall. Alone in the corridor, Joran pressed his back against the cool stone wall. He closed his eyes and let the council's rejection wash over him. His breath came in shallow gasps. He thought of Inara's fragile form, of that single flicker of color on her cheeks. He refused to believe that tradition would kill her spirit. Clenching his fists, he whispered to the empty hallway, "I will find a way." Determination surged through him. Though the council had closed its ears, Joran's heart remained open to hope, to defiance, and to the promise of a miracle that could unite two worlds. Joran and Elisa moved like shadows through the ship's lower decks. The emergency lights cast a dim red glow, and the hum of failing engines echoed around them. Every step brought them closer to the hidden lab at the core of the Oraish. Outside, the princess lay waiting, her life slipping away with each beat of her heart. Joran's chest tightened as he thought of her pale face. He would not let tradition steal her breath. They reached the heavy hatch that led to the lab. Elisa pulled out a small device and worked the code Joran had lifted from a guard's console. Lock clicked open. Joran steadied his nerves as the door slid aside. Inside, The room smelled of metal and antiseptic. Tubes and wires ran between machines that glowed with green and blue light. Alyssa hurried to her portable synthesizer, laying out vials and test tubes on the steel table. Joran stood by the stainless steel counter, watching her fingers move with precision. He felt the weight of every moment. In a few hours, the council's guards would find them here. He would face exile, disgrace, even imprisonment. Yet as he looked at Elisa's determined face, he knew it was worth any price. Anara's life mattered more than any rule. Joran took a deep breath to steady himself, recalling the warmth of her smile when they first met. Alyssa transferred the final solution into a clear syringe. The fluid glowed softly in the low light. She turned to Joran. "This is the human stem cell infusion mixed with growth factors adapted for Xylorian cells," explained. "Once we inject this into her bloodstream, her cells should start regenerating." Joran nodded and rolled up his sleeve. Muscles tensed as Alyssa cleaned his arm. He felt a sharp prick as the needle broke his skin. Warm blood welled in the vial. He watched the red liquid swirl into the mixture. The sight of his own blood, destined for Anara's veins, made his heart pound. Every drop meant a promise. "You ready, Alyssa?" asked softly. He met her eyes and nodded. "Do it." She filled a second syringe with the enriched solution. Joran held his breath. If this failed, nothing would save the princess. He could almost hear the council's cold laughter in his mind. They sealed the lab behind them and crept back to the biodeck. Joran led the way with careful steps, avoiding patrols and security cameras. His mind raced with memories of Anara's laughter, her kindness to every crew member. He thought of how her gentle voice had asked him once if he missed home. Missed her now more than ever. He would not let her slip away. In the quiet healing chamber, Inara lay wrapped in soft fibers against the cool glow of the life support unit. Her chest rose and fell with a faint rhythm. Joran stepped forward. Alyssa attached the syringe to the foreport with steady hands. Joran gripped Inara's hand, his own hand trembling. He whispered, "I'm here, princess. Trust me." The chamber. Doors sealed shut, cutting off the corridor lights. Alyssa pressed the plunger, sending the infused mixture into Inara's veins. Joran felt the cool rush through the tube and into the princess's arm. He kept his hand on hers, sharing his warmth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the monitors flickered. The readouts shifted from weak to stronger. A soft green light pulsed in time with Anara's heartbeat. Joran let out a breath he did not know he had held. Tears pricked his eyes. "Her cells are responding," she said, voice trembling. Joran stared at the monitors, relief flooding him. Anara's color deepened, and her breathing grew steady. The princess's eyelids fluttered, and she sighed softly like a flower unfolding at dawn. Joran pressed his forehead against the glass, overcome with hope. He had risked everything, broken every rule, and now a single life began to bloom. As alarms started to sound in the distance, Joran knew the council would come for him. But in that moment, he felt only victory. He had chosen compassion over fear, love over tradition. Princess Anara would live. And with her life saved, he believed. The galaxy would learn that miracles often begin with a single act of courage. Princess Anara's eyes opened to soft white light and the steady hum of the life support unit. Her gaze fluttered as she took in the curved ceiling of the biodeck. Warmth pooled in her chest, a gentle pulse of strength she had not felt since. Falling ill? She blinked and saw Joran Vale's face, drawn close against the glass. His eyes shone with relief. Her first breath in days came easier, and she let out a soft sigh as if waking from the worst nightmare. Joran pressed his hand to the outer glass, and Anara mirrored him on the inside. He smiled, voice thick with emotion. "You're awake." For the first time in weeks, Anara felt no pain, only the curious flutter of hope. She tested her arm and felt the slight sting where the infusion had entered her veins. Looking at the monitors, she saw the numbers climbing steadily. Her cells were regenerating faster than anyone expected. Alyssa Marin burst into the deck, her eyes bright and wild. She carried a datapad full of readings. "Your Majesty," she said, voice quivering, "the regeneration rate is off the charts. Your cells are outperforming both human and Xylorian standards." Anara managed a weak smile. Then it worked. Tears filled Joran's eyes as Elisa's voice cracked with excitement. The small room seemed to pulse with new life, as though every corner rejoiced. News spread quickly through the arrage. Crew members gathered outside the biodeck's glass walls, whispering of the miracle. Some touched the glass gently, offering soft words of welcome as Inara regained consciousness. The head nurse placed a cool cloth on her brow, and Inara felt gratitude so deep it brought tears to her eyes. She sat up slowly, supported by pillows, and allowed the nurses to adjust her bed. Each movement was accompanied by cheers and relieved laughter. As Inara regained strength, she asked for Joran. He stood just beyond the glass, as if afraid to step inside. At her nod, Elissa opened the chamber door. Joran entered, bowing low. Nara reached out and caught his hand, lifting it to her lips. He felt a warmth spread through him as she murmured, "Thank you." He could not speak. Instead, he knelt by her side, pressing his forehead to her hand. In that quiet moment, words were unnecessary. Over the next cycle, Inara's recovery astonished every specialist on board. She ate a light meal, soft fruits. From Xyloria, her appetite returning as if she had never been ill. Joran sat with her during each meal, his presence steadying her. She told him of dreams she had while in the coma, visions of two suns rising together, symbolizing unity. Joran listened, awe in his eyes. The idea of two worlds coming together no longer seemed impossible. By the third cycle, Inara was able to walk with assistance. The biodeck's doors opened wide, and she stepped out onto the corridor, leaning on Joran's arm. Crew members fell silent as she passed. Some bowed in respect, others simply watched with wonder. At the center of the hall, Elder Valmer and Lady Saren waited. Valmer's face was unreadable, but Saren's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Inara, standing taller than she had in weeks, addressed them both. "My life was saved by a human's courage. Let this miracle guide us beyond old fears." A hush followed her words, broken only by the soft hum of the engines. Valmer lowered his head in acknowledgement. He extended a hand to Joran. "You have given us more than we can repay," he said gravely. Joran accepted the handshake, feeling the weight of centuries of tradition shift in that grip. Around them, nobles and crew alike watched as the first bridge between two worlds was forged. That evening, under the glow of the Eurasia's observation dome, Inara and Joran stood side by side. The stars outside seemed brighter, as if celebrating. Inara placed her hand on Joran's arm. "This is only the beginning," she whispered. Joran nodded, hope blooming in his chest. Together they gazed into the vast expanse of space, knowing that from sacrifice and compassion, a new era of unity had dawned. Joran stepped onto the polished deck of the Araish beside Princess Inara, her heart still fluttering from the morning's triumph. Around them, scientists and nobles busied themselves with new projects. In the lab down the corridor, human and Xylorian researchers stood shoulder to shoulder, studying cell samples glowing in petri dishes. Inara watched them with wonder. For the first time, she saw her ship not as a royal vessel, but as a bridge between two peoples. Lady Saren approached. The pair, her silk robes, marking her noble rank, yet her eyes shone with excitement rather than pride. "Your Highness," she said in a warm voice, "the Joint Research Center is ready. I hope you will lead our first Council of Humanity and Xylorian delegates." Inara turned to Joran, her expression soft. He offered a reassuring nod. Though he was no politician, his courage had rewritten tradition. And now he would help shape the future. In the makeshift council chamber, long tables were set in a circle. Holographic maps of Xyloria and Earth's colonies hovered above, showing bold lines of proposed travel routes. Inara took her seat on a habacked chair, carved with ancient symbols. Joran sat to her right, his human frame humble among alien statuary. As the delegates settled, Inara raised her hand gently. "Friends," she began, "we have seen what fear can cost and what courage can save. Let us choose courage." Hall fell silent as Inara spoke. Voices that once hissed at the mention of human intervention now leaned in, curious and respectful. A human botanist described how Earth's plants could adapt to Zalorian soil. Zalorian engineer explained ways to enhance human spacesuits for Arctic moons. Each idea wove together, building excitement rather than barrier. Joran watched Inara's face glow with each new plan, proud of how her strength and his sacrifice had sparkled hope. After the meeting, Rain escorted Inara to the observation dome. Beneath the transparent ceiling, stars and nebulae painted a silent masterpiece. Inara leaned on the railing, her dress brushing the smooth floor. "Do you remember the first time you looked at the stars?" she asked softly. Joran nodded. "I thought they were cold and distant. Now I see they are threads in a tapestry we both belong to." Inara smiled, its tears glinting like starlight. Their moment of peace lasted until the dome's speaker crackled. Dr. Marin's voice called them back to the lab. A new batch of hybrid cells had shown unexpected properties, resilience to radiation 10 times greater than native cells. This discovery could protect crews on long space voyages. Joran and Inara hurried down the corridor, excitement lifting their steps. Each found hope not just in saving one life, but in protecting thousands more. In the lab, scientists crowded around a console. Alyssa Marone held a vial up to the light. "These cells could change space travel forever," she said. With a tremor, delegates clapped and cheered. Inara stepped to the front. "Let this miracle guide us," she declared. "We will share our knowledge freely, so no world suffers alone." Joran squeezed her hand, his eyes bright. Together, they stood as proof. That unity was stronger than any virus, any fear. That evening, under the soft glow of Zaloria's twin moons visible through the dome, Inara and Joran walked the deck together. Crew members paused to bow, but the princess and warrior simply nodded in return. In their quiet walk, they spoke of new missions, medical relief to distant colonies, research outposts on uncharted planets, and schools where human and Xylorian children could learn side by side. Each idea was a seed planted in starlit soil, as the Arraish continued its journey to the next world. Princess Inara and Captain Joran Vale watched the horizon of space together. Their hearts were full of promise. From near death and sacrifice had blossomed a miracle that reached beyond 2 lives. They had kindled the first spark of true partnership between humanity and Xyloria. And in that spark lay the power to light 1,000 worlds with hope, compassion, and shared purpose. Princess Inara stood at the prow of the Arraish as it descended toward the neutral moon of Valorous. The ship's hull shuddered under atmospheric friction, and light from the planet's twin suns danced across her face. Behind her, Captain Joran Vale waited, his hand lightly resting on the rail beside her. Together, they watched as the world below came into Focasa, land of silver plains and crystal forests, untouched and ripe with possibility. The landing bay doors opened with a hiss, revealing rows of human and Xylorian researchers, engineers, and medics. They wore mixed uniforms now, earth blues with Xylorian silver trim. Murmurs of awe rippled through the crowd as Inara and Joran descended the ramp. She smiled, lifting a gloved hand in greeting. The gathered delegation bowed and cheered. There, faces bright with hope, Inara felt a swell of pride. This was the moment they had fought for together. As the princess and warrior made their way across the tundra-like surface, young children ran ahead, carrying banners painted with both Xylorian script and Earth symbols. Their laughter echoed under strange skies. Inara knelt to greet them, her gown brushing the frost-crisp ground. She spoke softly, and they reached up to touch her hand. Joran watched her, thinking how she had grown stronger through suffering, and how her kindness now led to people's forward. They reached a stone dais prepared for the opening ceremony. Inara raised her voice, clear and steady despite the chill wind. "Today, we stand not as separate worlds," she said, "but as one family." She looked at Joran, whose eyes shone with encouragement. The crowd erupted in applause that shook the air. Drums sounded, and both human and Xylorian banners unfurled, their colors blending as if woven by the wind itself. After the speeches, Inara and Joran toured the research facilities set up beside the landing site. They moved from lab to greenhouse to workshop, watching scientists tend to hybrid plants and test new materials infused with human and Xylorian genetics. In each room, hopeful faces greeted them, and Anara offered words of thanks and encouragement. Joran joined in, explaining the warrior's code of honor and the human spirit of exploration. Together, they showed how two cultures could teach and learn in equal measure. At midday, they sat for a simple meal beneath a transparent dome. The table held dishes made from earth grains and Xylorian fruits, colorful and fragrant. Anara raised a glass of sparkling aqua wine. To life, she toasted. Joran followed with a nod. To unity, he added. The delegates echoed around them, and for a moment, politics and fear fell away. There was only joy and a shared belief that anything was possible. As the suns dipped toward the horizon, Anara and Joran walked hand in hand to the edge of a crystalline lake. The water glowed, faintly reflecting the sky's shifting colors. Anara paused and looked at Joran. "We have done more than save a life," she said softly. "We have given the galaxy a new path." He squeezed her hand. "Your courage inspired me," he replied, "when your trust showed me the power of compassion." Night fell, and thousands of lanterns, human floating bubbles, and Xylorian light orbs rose into the sky. Anara watched them drift among the stars, each one a promise of peace and discovery. She thought of the days when she lay helpless, and how Joran's sacrifice had sparked this miracle. Now it was their turn to guard that promise, to nurture the bond between worlds so it would grow strong and lasting. Under the canopy of light, Princess Anara and Captain Joran Vale stood together, silhouettes against the glowing night. They knew challenges still lay ahead, far-off threats, political tides, and unknown dangers of uncharted space. But they also knew that with unity, empathy, and shared purpose, those challenges could be met. As the final lantern drifted upward, Anara whispered, "This is only the beginning." Joran smiled and pressed his forehead to hers. Together, he agreed, "We will light 1,000 worlds." In that moment, two hearts and two civilizations beat as one, and a new era of hope was born. Joran and Alyssa moved like shadows through the ship's lower decks. The emergency lights cast a dim red glow, and the hum of failing engines echoed around them. Every step brought them closer to the hidden lab at the core of the Araish. Outside, the princess lay waiting, her life slipping away with each beat of her heart. Joran's chest tightened as he thought of her pale face. He would not let tradition steal her breath. They reached the heavy hatch that led to the lab. Alyssa pulled out a small device and worked the code Joran had lifted from a guard's console. The lock clicked open. Joran steadied his nerves as the door slid aside. Inside, the room smelled of metal and antiseptic. Tubes and wires ran between machines that glowed with green and blue light. Alyssa hurried to her portable synthesizer. Laying out vials and test tubes on the steel table, Joran stood by the stainless steel counter. Watching her fingers move with precision, he felt the weight of every moment. In a few hours, the council's guards would find them here. He would face exile, disgrace, even imprisonment. Yet as he looked at Elisa's determined face, he knew it was worth any price. Life's life mattered more than any rule. Joran took a deep breath to steady himself. Recalling the warmth of her smile when they first met, Alyssa transferred the final solution into a clear syringe. The fluid glowed softly in the low light. She turned to Joran. "This is the human stem cell infusion, mixed with growth factors, adapted for Xylorian cells," she explained. "Once we inject this into her bloodstream, her cells should start regenerating." Joran nodded and rolled up his sleeve. His muscles tensed as Alyssa cleaned his arm. He felt a sharp prick as the needle broke his skin. Warm blood welled in. The vial, he watched the red liquid swirl into the mixture. The sight of his own blood, destined for Anara's veins, made his heart pound. Every drop meant a promise. "Are you ready?" Alyssa asked softly. He met her eyes and nodded. "Do it." She filled a second syringe with the enriched solution. Joran held his breath. If this failed, nothing would save the princess. He could almost hear the council's cold laughter in his mind. They sealed the lab behind them and crept back to the biodeck. Joran led the way with careful steps, avoiding patrols and security cameras. His mind raced with memories of Inara's laughter, her kindness to every crew member. He thought of how her gentle voice had asked him once if he missed home. Her now more than ever. He would not let her slip away in the quiet healing chamber. Inara lay wrapped in soft fibers against the cool glow of the life support unit. Her chest rose and fell with a faint rhythm. Joran stepped forward. Lissa attached the syringe to the foreport with steady hands. Joran gripped Inara's hand, his own hand trembling. He whispered, "I'm here, princess. Trust me." The chamber. Doors sealed shut, cutting off the corridor lights. Alyssa pressed the plunger, sending the infused mixture into Inara's veins. Joran felt the cool rush through the tube and into the princess's arm, kept his hand on hers, sharing his warmth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the monitors flickered. The readouts shifted from weak to stronger. A soft green light pulsed in time with Inara's heartbeat. Joran let out a breath he did not know he had held. Tears pricked his eyes. Alyssa checked the readings with awe. Her cells are responding. She said, voice trembling. Joran stared at the monitors, relief flooding him. Inara's color deepened, and her breathing grew steady. The princess's eyelids fluttered, and she sighed softly like a flower unfolding at dawn. Joran pressed his forehead against the glass, overcome with hope. He had risked everything, broken every rule, and now a single life began to bloom. As alarms started to sound in the distance, Joran knew the council would come for him. But in that moment, he felt only victory. He had chosen compassion over fear, love over tradition. Princess Inara would live. And with her life saved, he believed. The galaxy would learn that miracles often begin with a single act of courage.